Hi everyone, my name is Gay and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is October the 23rd, 1985. I'm going to start this out with letting you know that I am legally blind and I have a visual problem. So being asked to read my story is never really comfortable. I can do it, but there's this awkwardness. So I pulled up my story online because I'm on the computer and I can make the print just as big as I need for it to be to see it. But a lot of times, I don't have the whole sentence on the page. So I'm moving the screen back and forth so I can read my own story. I thought that might be easier than putting on and off magnifying glasses and reading out of the book. So if my reading feels a little choppy or slow, you'll understand why. And here we go. Winner takes all. Legally blind, but no longer alone, she found a way to stay sober, raise a family, and turn her life over to the care of God. My parents were very much in love and had been married a couple of years when they decided to start a family. They were so excited when their first son was born. They owned their own small business. And with the arrival of their son, their lives seemed perfect until tragedy struck. When their son was about 2 years old, my parents were eating at a local restaurant, and he was dancing to the music of the jukebox and having a good time. He followed some older children outside and was hit by a car. My parents carried him in an ambulance to the hospital. 30 miles away, where he was pronounced dead on arrival. My parents were stricken with grief. My my parents moved to this little town called Yorktown, Texas, and they opened this little five and dime, dry goods store. And my dad, they joined the church. They joined the baseball team. They wanted to do everything they could to be part of that community. So it was after one of the baseball games that they went and to this little cafe that the town had where this incident happened. It was years before my mom could even tell us the story. And even when she was 98 years old in 2019 when she passed away. And even, days before her death, one of the nurses said, I'd never heard that story about your brother. It was a pain that my parents carried their whole life. They went on and had a good life, but that was always there. It never really went away for them. One miracle that brought them some joy in the midst of all the pain was that mom found out that she was pregnant. When this little girl was born, she brought them great joy, and her name was Joy also. They named her Joy. She did not take the place of her brother, but in her own right, she did bring them joy. They tried again to have another little boy, but they had me instead. Not only was I a girl, but I was also born legally blind. A year or so later, they finally did get the boy they wanted, and there was a big party to celebrate his birth. From the very beginning, I felt different and unwanted. At a very young age, as children do, I had to make sense out of my life. So I came to the conclusion that I was bad and God knew I was bad. So God made me handicapped to punish me. I thought that the undertow of sadness in my family was because of me. Later, I realized that a part of it might have been due to my handicap, but there was still a lot of grieving going on. My father turned to alcohol and was a very angry man. When we were growing up, he was very critical. I was told things on a daily basis like I was dumb and lazy. When I started school, I truly realized how different I was from other children. Children were very cruel and made fun of me. I could tell you many stories of the times I was treated badly and always thought the stories would be, and although the stories would be different, the feeling was always the same. I was not good enough, and I hurt. My, my, I can't even imagine the grief that my parents were dealing with. But I think one time, I don't think I made this up, but sometimes I'm not sure. My mom made some remark to me about they must have felt terrible guilt that they weren't watching their son and that tragedy happened. And one time mom made the remark, that he had died and like I was their punishment. I was born handicapped, because I don't know. And maybe I made that up, but I do believe she made some remark that led me to believe that was true. And the party for my brother that was born after me, that was accurate, but the timing was different. And one time, my I made a remark to my dad, if my brother had been a boy and had been first, I said I probably would have never been born. And this was years and years and years down the road, before he died. He said, you don't know that, Gay. We might have had a whole bunch more kids. So, I made up all kinds of stories to try to make sense out of my life. Special education was mostly for the mentally retarded back then when I was in school, so I did not get much support from my teachers, though there were two teachers who made a difference in my life. One was a third grade teacher who got me large print books. It felt so good that someone understood I had a problem. But that was overruled by the embarrassment I felt trying to carry those big books around. They felt like encyclopedias to a third grader. The other teacher was a freshman high school teacher who flunked me. It was as if I heard her say, "You can do better." All the other teachers just let me pass, whether I knew the material or not. When I got out of high school, I felt as if I had gotten out of some kind of prison. I graduated 150 out of 152, and I felt that I was done. I had one teacher that told me if it was too hard for me to read a book, I could let my brother tell me a story and then do a book report on it. I really, the teachers weren't very, back then, when I was a little girl, the teachers weren't very educated on visual impairments and how to really help me. That high school teacher, the freshman high school teacher that flunked me, when I was a senior, she started teaching senior English rather than freshman English. And to graduate, I had to make a C on the final. If I didn't make a C on the final, I would not graduate. This teacher had already flunked me once. I had no doubt that she would flunk me again. So man, I studied 2 days before the final, of course, but I studied and I studied and I studied because I wanted to graduate. And and whether I really made that C and graduated or not, I don't know, or maybe she just let me slide. But I really put in a bunch of effort for 2 days anyway before that final. It was during my high school years that I discovered alcohol, and my problems were over. Now I was pretty and smart. For the first time, I felt as if I fit in. I still could not see. Oh, well, no big deal. I felt good. And man, that couldn't have been more true. That I felt like I had found my best friend. I felt like all that pain I carried inside, it seemed to be there constantly. I had the tears of a clown. On the outside, there wasn't one person that knew I felt sad or that my visual impairment bothered me. I had too much pride to let anyone know. So I was crying inside. I hurt inside, but on the outside, I appeared to be a happy go lucky kid because I wouldn't give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me cry unless I was drunk. And I'd get drunk, and at first everything was wonderful. And then, the tears in my beer, then I'd get really sad after I got to a certain point. And with certain people, I would just cry and bawl. And then the next morning, I'd wake up and be happy and joyous and free all over again on the outside, and in the inside, I heard someone share at a meeting one time, when your thoughts, your words, your actions, all that matches, we have sanity. When what I think and how I act and how I feel isn't matching, I don't have that sanity going on. So I lived in a lot of this cognitive dissonance, this confusion of what I presented on the outside and what was on the inside did not match. I got married and had 2 children. I married a man who was not or could not be honest. For several years after we were married, I did not drink. My sister went through a divorce and moved to the town I was living in. To be a good sister, I went out with her, for she knew no one in the town. We went to a country western place. They had a beer bus, and that country western place was Mickey Gilley's and on the outskirts of Houston, Texas. You just paid a certain amount to get in, and you could drink all you wanted to drink. I thought I had arrived in heaven. We did this several times a week, and then she started meeting people and started dating. Well, I couldn't drive, so I started drinking more and more at home. That man that I married, last time Carol asked me to read this story, I was reading it from a hotel room with my son and daughter, who are, grown adults and have families of their own, because the 3 of us went to see my ex-husband, who was dying, and he died last May. His father died in October. His mother died last week. Oh, wait, the funeral was last week. So my kids' my father and 2 grandparents, just recently died. And I reconnected with my ex-daughter and my ex-sister-in-law, and it's really been good. Because you always wondered, did he get better after we weren't married anymore? And she told me that when they needed to get him onto Medicaid, they couldn't do it because he had gotten a DWI, 25 years ago, and for 25 years had driven without a driver's license. So she needed the driver's license to go get the birth certificate, but he didn't have a driver's license. And she was so frustrated with everything that went on. She said, I love my brother, Gay, but I do understand why you had to leave, and that was very, very comforting. And then, like I said, her mother, my ex-mother-in-law, died a couple of weeks ago, and she was on the way to the funeral home to make arrangements. She pulled off on the side of the road and she called. She said, they're all gone, Gay. They're all gone. My brother, my mother, my father, they're all gone. And I said, I know, and she and I hold a part of each other's history because we knew each other before she met her husband. Way back, she was still a teenager when I married her brother. But this is Alcoholics Anonymous. This is Alcoholics Anonymous, healing relationships, allowing me to handle myself with integrity, that I was welcome into my ex-husband's, my ex-in-law's home. We went there 2 days before she died. My son, my and two granddaughters and I, we went there and we sang songs, old Christian songs that my ex-mother-in-law would know. And I was welcome and I was wanted and I connected with those people. That's a gift of Alcoholics Anonymous. We don't have to go to the bitter end, being angry and bitter with people. We can handle ourselves in a way where we still fit in. If my ex-daughter, my ex-sister-in-law, I'm sorry, my ex-sister-in-law hadn't wanted to connect, I would have respected that. But it felt so nice for me to have that type of closure that the two of us could talk about the times in our lives that only she and I know about. Several years later, alcohol had control over my life. I had a t-shirt that I just loved. It said, I used to hate myself in the morning. Now I sleep till noon. That described my feelings totally. I had that just uncomfortable in my own skin, and I didn't like me, and I was getting drunk every day, and I didn't feel like I was a good mom. And that t-shirt existed, and I really did. It felt like the t-shirt knew me, like it described me, like the thoughts, the words, and the actions were all matching somehow. When my daughter had to go to the hospital, I stayed sober for 5 days. She was the 5 days she was there, and told myself that I had licked the alcohol problem. On the way home from the hospital, I got drunk again. I cannot tell you the number of times I tried to stop on my own. My son would look at me and say, Mom, why do you have to drink so much? He was about 11 years old at the time. So that night that we got home from the hospital, I got on my knees and said, God, change me or let me die. I don't want to live this way anymore. And I vividly remember that night. I was desperate. The promise that I made not to drink were for my husband's birthday, I was going to give him a sober wife, and I absolutely meant it. And my other days that I just thought I was going to be successful was one year, January the 1st was on a Monday, and I really believed that was an omen and I was going to be able to stay sober. And then this time when my daughter was in the hospital and I didn't drink, those are the 3 times I really had confidence that I wasn't going to have to drink. And all 3 times were very short-lived. And but I remember that night turning my life over to God and just admitting I needed help. Sorry, I needed to find my place. It was at this point in my life that I called Alcoholics Anonymous and asked for help. I got out the yellow pages, looked up the number, and made that call. We did not have cell phones in those days. They sent two ladies over to my house. They sat with me, and I told them that I drank because my marriage was bad. One of the ladies held my hand and said, "That is not why you drink." I told them I drank because I was part German. She patted my hand and said, "No, that's not why you drink." Then I told them I drank because I was legally blind. They said, "No, that's not why you drink." And they started to explain to me that alcoholism is a disease. They shared their stories with me and told me how alcohol had taken over their lives. And the truth is, they edited it, and I'm glad they did. But the truth is, the lady held my hand, and when I said I drank because I was legally blind, she patted my hand and said, "Bullshit." And that was one thing that was edited differently for the big book. I started getting, I started going to meetings, and my stories sounded so dull next to some of the stories I heard. The most interesting thing I could think to tell was about the time my friends, who were also drunk, let me drive the car. I almost got us all killed, but what fun! Legally blind, drunk, and behind the wheel of a car. God was really taking care of me and the other people on the road that night. I just didn't know it at the time. That was when I was a senior in high school, when that incident happened. And one time only, I invited my mother, father, sister, and brother to hear my AA talk. That night, I drove from San Antonio, Texas to Austin, Texas, which is about 70 miles. And I shared that story behind the podium when I shared my story. And afterwards, my mom came up to me and she said, "Please, Gay, please don't ever tell that story again. I think, again, it triggered in her, I'm not being a good mom because my daughter's drunk and out driving a car." But I still tell the story. I bet she can handle it from heaven. The truth is, most of my drinking was done at home alone. I would call people and talk, and the following mornings were awful, trying to piece together what I had said. I I would we wouldn't get, it wasn't like these cell phones. It was phones, and at the end of the month you got the phone bill, and I didn't know who I had called sometime for 30 days until I got the phone bill and could look. I didn't know how long I had talked, didn't know how much it was going to cost, but at the end of every month when the phone bill would come, I just have knots in my stomach because I wouldn't know how big that bill was going to be and who were going to be the recipients of those phone calls. I would call people, and the following mornings were awful, trying to piece together what I had said. I would say things to my husband like, "Wasn't that an interesting call last night?" hoping he would volunteer information. My hands were beginning to shake without the alcohol. Yet when I got to AA, I wasn't sure I belonged because my drunkalog was not exciting. Then one night at an AA meeting, a friend said that even though he had been in jail and done lots and lots of stuff, he was no different from me. He felt the same things I felt. It was then that I knew I was not unique, that the people did understand the pain inside of me. And that was so huge to me. And, I sat there, and the more exciting and colorful and tragic other people's stories were, the more dull mine seemed. And I didn't feel like I belonged, but I've shared that story many times, in many places. And I've had other people come up to me and said thank you because they experienced that too. That if you don't have all that yet's happened, that you don't belong here. And it is, there's this guy at a meeting that I go to, talks about that too, that it's the similarities of that awful feeling that we can't stop drinking. The stories and how that got displayed is so different for all of us, but that feeling is the same, that obsession with alcohol, that wanting to drink, not being able to stop, not knowing what's going to happen once we pick up the drink. It was such a freedom when that phenomena of craving left. It was like a miracle. I met a lady who had a handicapped child, and we learned so much from each other. One important thing that I learned was that handicap is not a four-letter word. Handicap is not a dirty word. I learned that I was not bad, that I was one of God's special children, that God had a plan for my life. The people of AA showed me how my past could and would become an asset. I got a sponsor and started working the steps, the promises of the big book started coming true for me. The feeling of uselessness and self-pity went away, and I could see how my experience could help others. The lady that had the daughter that was handicapped, her name was Courtney. She died a few years ago, and I got to share at her funeral a little bit. And she was precious. She was just a perfect, little girl. And I really, how many AA meetings do you go to where a parent brings a handicapped child to the meetings? God took care of arranging my sobriety and the lessons that I needed to learn so that I could see that from a different perspective. Also, I could watch how this mama, her name was Terry, how she handled Courtney, how she adored Courtney and loved Courtney. My experience with my mother, she'd look at me and we'd interact, and she was a good mom. But I think when she looked at me, it triggered that guilt, triggered that pain inside of her. So I just didn't have that same experience. My mom looked at me as though I was handicapped, that I was flawed, that she was so sorry that I was handicapped. This mama looked at her daughter as though she was just perfect, just a perfect human being the way she was. The mama of Courtney was in recovery. She had AA. My mom still had a lot of grieving and pain going on. And so partly that is something that I learned from my mom, to pity myself for my visual impairment. And one thing I share a lot from, when I'm speaking is AA taught me that there's a difference between feeling sorry for myself and feeling my pain. And I share that a lot because it was so huge. I don't care how spiritual we are. When sad things happen, We get to grieve just like anyone else gets to grieve. AA spirituality doesn't take away the grieving process. So when I got to AA, y'all let me grieve the sadness of being a handicapped child, being visually impaired. And that was something I had never experienced before. I was asked to share my experience, strength, and hope at one of the deals on this women's international conference, and I shared that, the difference between feeling my pain and feeling sorry for myself. The next day, I got on another little panel and workshop. This one lady said, once I saw Gay on this meeting, I couldn't stop thinking. She said about the remarks she made about feeling sorry for yourself and feeling your pain. She said, my husband has 4-stage cancer, and I'm almost been afraid to share at meetings because people would think I'm feeling sorry for myself. She said that remark that Gabe made put it in perspective to honor the grieving process. And I think that's so important for us to remember that when I'm sad today, I'm real. AA teaches me to be real. When I'm sad, I cry. When I'm happy, I laugh. I get to be real today. I'll continue. When I was 3 years sober, I made one of the most difficult decisions I had ever made. I left the marriage. I did not leave because I didn't love him. I still love him. But the marriage was not a healthy place for me to be. I found myself with 2 children to support. I was legally blind and had no job skills. When I moved out, I first moved into public housing for blind people. This was a shocking experience for me, but it was full of growth. For the first time in my life, I was learning to accept my handicap. Before this, I would plan out my day as if I could see and then plan it out again based on the fact that my vision was limited. Through the Commission for the Blind, I got involved in a program that helped blind people become self-employed. After 3 months of training, I moved to a city a couple of 100 miles away from where I knew no one. I lived in an apartment that was about a mile from a coffee shop that I operated. I would walk to work at 6:30 a.m. carrying $200 in opening cash on a dark road, and I was afraid. I had 2 people working for me. And on my second day, one of them did not show up. I had never run a business before, and my 3 months of training just didn't seem enough. It was a hard time for me. A lady from a major food company came by to take my grocery order, and I didn't have a clue how much coffee, bacon, or hamburger meat I needed. She shared with me that what the previous manager had ordered and helped me place an order. God only knows how we got on the subject, but she was a member of AA and later would become my new sponsor. She picked me up and took me to meetings. At one of the meetings, I met a guy who, for the next year, picked me up and drove me to work. I paid him a dollar each morning. I am sure that did not cover his gas, but it helped me to feel I was paying my way. For the first time in my life, I was now supporting myself. That we went to the meeting, and then the meeting after the meeting at Jim's coffee shop, and it was raining, And I made the remark, it's going to be really hard for me to get to work tomorrow. And he said, Gay, I'll pick you up and I'll drive you. And I gave him the $5 a week and a cup of coffee. And he did that for a long time until I started dating my present husband. And then he started picking me up and taking me to work. But what a gift. What a gift that guy gave me, where I didn't have to get the children ready for school and get them breakfast and have to walk to work. It was really a blessing. And the lady in the coffee shop that became, how does that happen? Out of all the salesmen for this food chain that came to take my order, that she was a member of AA. The stories full of, all our stories are full of miracles on how I got what I needed when I needed it so that I could continue walking towards this in life, being happy, joyous, and free in a connection with my higher power. This is just an example of how God works in my life. No longer did I have to drink, but it was much more. It was much more than that. Everything I needed was provided. I had a God of my understanding that helped me in every aspect of my life. In working the steps, my life changed. I think differently today. I feel differently today. I am new. We have a sign at the AA meeting I go to that says, expect a miracle. My sobriety is full of miracles. When my son filled out an application for college, I filled one out too and was accepted. Soon I will be a senior, and I have a 3.71 grade point average. Thanks to AA, I have come a long way from being near the bottom of my high school class. It takes me a lot longer to read the material, so I have a CCTV. I put my book under this camera and it comes out in big print on a monitor. I have a talking calculator that helped me go through statistics and a telescope that can help me see the board. I accept help from the Disabled Student Services, and I gladly make use of the volunteer note takers. I learned to accept the things I could not change, in this case, my vision, and change the things I can. I could be grateful for and accept the visual aids instead of being embarrassed and rejecting them as I had when I was younger. I have already told you about some of the miracles that have happened. However, there's more. I want to tell you how I feel inside. I am no longer spiritually bankrupt. It's as if I have a magic source in my life that has provided me with all I need. I just celebrated my 12th year of sobriety a couple of months ago. And in October, I just celebrated my 38th year of sobriety. So this was written a long, long time ago. When I first came to AA, I didn't know who I was. My sponsor said, great. If you don't know who you are, you can become whoever God wants you to be. Today, I am doing things that I never dreamed possible. More importantly, it is a peace and serenity I feel inside that keep me coming back. I have been through hard times in and out of sobriety, but before AA, it didn't matter how good things got. I always had a feeling that something was wrong. Since AA, it doesn't matter how bad things get. I always have a feeling that everything is going to be all right. In working the 12 steps, my life and my old way of thinking have changed. I have no control over some of the things that happen in my life, but with the help of God, I can choose how I will respond. Today, I choose to be happy, and when I'm not, I have the tools of this program to put me back on track. I I am so full of gratitude today. Like I said, that was written when I was 12 years sober. And some people want to know, about my story getting in the big book. I was in school at the time. I was at a Saturday morning women's meeting. Uh, um, and this lady gave me a ride home from the meeting. And on the way home, she had this packet of information. And she said, I think we should write our stories for possible inclusion in the fourth edition. I had a test I was studying for. I didn't, I felt like you probably needed to know somebody in New York to make that happen. I figured, that someone had a friend and they would put a little poll or something for them. I didn't know anyone in New York. I just knew my people at the groups I went to. And but I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I didn't, she got it to me, and I didn't want her to have a resentment against me. And she went to the effort to get this envelope and have all the papers and packaged up into it for me. And so I wrote it real quick. It was towards the deadline of when the stories needed to be submitted. I wrote it as fast as I can. I truly did, because I needed to study for a test. If I had written it with the thought of being included, it probably never would have been included because I would have messed it up. But I took it and walked to the nearest mailbox from where we lived, so it would go out on the correct date, because if I didn't and put it at the one by my house, it would have been picked up the next day and wouldn't have been postmarked on the correct date for the deadline. And 3.5 years later, I got a letter in the mail that the fourth edition of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous had been approved, and my story had been selected to be in our book. And I was truly in a state of shock for quite some time. I didn't say anything to anybody because first I thought maybe it was some sort of a joke or something. And then I did share with my sponsor, and then gradually I let more people, know about that. And it has been, led to a ton of speaking engagements and meeting people all over the world. But so has the pandemic. We connect all over the world. That's how I met Carol. And God's alive and well, and miracles are happening. The age of miracles is still with us. And oh my gosh, this reading my story has brought up so many more memories that I could tell. But I want to tell one story about my dad. When I did my resentment inventory with him for calling me stupid and lazy, and I got to my part, I realized that just because he said it didn't make it true. And how I had used that not to do the work, not to study, just to be lazy. And so when my son was signing up for college, and I signed up too, Alcoholics Anonymous took all my excuses away. So when I signed up for school, and then I did well, I graduated magna cum laude in 2000, I believe, or 2001. Um, just about real close to the same time I got that letter that my story was gonna to be in the big book. And my dad, like I said, I invited my father, my mother, my sister, and brother once to come hear my story. And at the end of my sharing my story, my dad came up to the podium. He was looking straight at me after everyone that wanted to say hello to me did. And he looked straight at me and he had tears coming down his eyes. And he said, Gay, was it my fault? I said, no, Daddy, it wasn't your fault. I'm an alcoholic. And we had such beautiful healing in my relationship. All my relationships have had that effect. In sobriety, I had a turbulent relationship with my ex-daughter-in-law. My son got divorced, and there was some friction there, as a lot of times there are between mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws. But when my daughter-in-law's mother died, they asked me to be part of that service too. It's this program. I was told if you go through the 12 steps and you don't know more about love, you've missed the point of the program. This program has taught me to love and to nurture the relationships in my life, and the ones that don't want anything to do with me, I can honor that space needs to be there. But this program truly has taught me how to accept love. That was even harder than giving love. But this program has taught me and allows me to be part of life. And I usually share this story behind the podium, and I'll share it right now and then I'll quit. I was on a cruise with my son, and we were at the glaciers in Alaska, and he looked around and he said, Mom, look at all this. I feel insignificant. And I said, look at all of this. I feel significant because I am part of all of this. I'm part of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm part of my family. I'm part of the AA groups I go to. I'm part of God's world and God's plans. And this program has taught me that we all matter. Each and every one of us matters because of what you've been through, exactly the way you've been through it. You're going to touch someone's life no one else can touch. Our higher power has a purpose and an importance for each and every one of us. And I needed Alcoholics Anonymous to teach me that. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Gay. On behalf of everybody, thank you so much, Gay, for sharing all that. If you have questions you want to ask Gay, put them in the chat and send them to me. Carrie is going to ask Gay some questions now. They will also be recorded. And after Carrie asks her questions, I will ask the questions in the chat. And Gay, thank you. And then after that, we will unmute and let y'all thank Gay and share what you would like with her. So Carrie, it's up to you now.
Thank you, Carol. I'm Carrie. I'm an alcoholic. Gay, thank you so much for being here and reading your story. I've heard you read it before today. I heard some details that I'd missed, and it's just lovely to hear it in your voice, and your story is so special. And tell us, if you don't mind, about the title, Winner Takes All. Is that something that you had to do with putting on your story, the title?
I had at the AA club I went to, they had a casino night where they were doing a fundraiser, and I had a paragraph in the original writing that I wrote and sent in that had something about that. I don't remember exactly what it was. And I said, and winner takes all, blah, blah, blah. They took out the paragraph that I wrote, but they kept that one line and made it the title.
Got it. And where was your AA meeting at the time? And can you tell us a little bit about, what an AA meeting looked like when you were 12 years sober?
I was going to the Winners Club, the Winners Circle in San Antonio, Texas. There's two groups here, Club 12 and the Winners Club. And I was going to meet him there. It was walking distance from where I live. So I could get there, and it was or get rides, because it wasn't that far for someone to pick me up. When I got sober in 85, we didn't have as many women in the program. But 12 years later, that wasn't as true anymore. There were more of those relationships. We still didn't have cell phones then. That didn't come till a little bit later. Or maybe we did, I don't know. But when I first got sober, we didn't. But around that time, you know, I didn't have the option of sending my story in by email. It could only be mailed in, or I didn't have the capacity on my computer to email it in. So I don't know if I'm answering that question, but there you go. That's what you got,
Yep,
Carrie.
that's perfect. That's perfect. And you told us about the situation of kind of being encouraged to write your story. But was there any other inspiration? Tell us perhaps, reading the story of somebody else from a prior edition in the big book,
So
something like that.
I did love the stories in the big book. I read them before I read the first 164 pages. But no, I was just went to the meeting and needed to study. There was no inspiration other than truly not wanting to hurt her feelings.
That's interesting. Um, so your story, you described feelings as a child of not being good enough and feeling hurt. What does it look like in your life today when you come across a person or a situation that feels critical to you?
Got the steps. Don't let a good resentment go to waste. Don't let hurt feelings go to waste. When that stuff comes up, I have the tools to work through it, and it does. I'm still human. That stuff sometimes is still my first reaction, but I don't have to stay there or live there. So if someone hurts my feelings today or is critical, that's on them. But I have had people in AA come up to me and say, if you believed in God more, you wouldn't be visually impaired. I've had people after an AA meeting want to lay hands on me and pray. I've had people tell me that wearing sunglasses, because I'm extremely sensitive to light, was a way of hiding from people. And it was really me being dishonest. I've had a lot of weird things said to me about my vision. So I'm so glad I have this program that I can separate their distorted perception from my own truth and live in a connection with my higher power. That I'm just, I don't see what you see. We have different experiences, but one isn't more valuable than another. My experience in life is just as valuable as anyone else's, and whoever you are, experience in life is just as valuable as mine. Got the tools today to look at life differently. I had a sponsor that would say, there's another way of looking at this other than the way you're looking at it now. Pause when agitated or doubtful, that holy pause where I get to shift my perception.
Wow. Gay, you also wrote about at the end of your drinking, getting on your knees and praying to God to change you or to let you die. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with God or your God at the time you got sober, and really just how that has evolved over the decades?
Now that could be an hour conversation, if not days. But I believed in God. I grew up in a church where we went to Sunday school. I believed in God. I had no problem with that. I just believed God thought I was bad and made me this was my childhood beliefs, that God had made me handicapped because God already knew I was a bad person and needed to be punished. I believed that as a little girl. I really did. So to evolve from that to God help me stay sober, to my life is perfect and matters just as much as anyone else's. We're all valuable, was a huge distance to go, a huge change, a psychic change, a difference in belief systems, to believe that we are all, I say sometimes behind the podium, we're not bad. Was told we're not bad people trying to get good. We're sick people trying to get better. And I don't believe either one of those. I believe we're perfect people trying to remember the truth about who we are. And so there's my connection to God today, and there's where I came from.
Beautiful. What's your favorite line in the Big Book?
You probably already know because we go to meetings together, but some of us tried to hold on to our old ideals, and the result is nil till we let go absolutely. That is what changed, opened up my mind to change everything and make room for God. That is my favorite line in the book. That's our whole program as far as I'm concerned.
Wow. Well, last question for me is there anything that you feel like you should have added to your story that was published?
That's never crossed my mind that there was something else I should have answered. I believe that was a total incomplete God deal. No, it still surprises me how all that fit together and happened, because I would have never believed that to be possible ever, ever, ever.
Beautiful. Well, that's it for me. Gay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Carrie.
Carol, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Carrie. Great job. Gay, to follow up her question, is there something that you had submitted that they omitted when they did publish your story that you wish they left in?
No, but there's one thing I am glad they took out. I talked about peeing in my pants and having those accidents. And that was when when I got the letter that the fourth edition had been approved. I had no clue what I had written. That was 3.5 years earlier. So I went and tried to find the computer I had written it on to see if it was still there. And so I could read what I had written. And I was so glad that they chose to edit that out. I'm almost embarrassed saying this out loud, but didn't we all have those accidents?
Thanks, Gay. If you have any questions you would like me to ask Gay, please put them in the chat. Gay, I have one. She said, you spoke about the tools of the program at the end of your story. Can you share what tools you use now and how it's evolved over the years?
Yes, I use 12 steps, 12 tools, 12 steps. And those evolve over the year. I don't think it's the same thing I did. I was told anytime you go through major changes, start working the steps as if you're brand new. The steps are the same steps, but I have a deeper understanding than I did before on different areas of my life. So that understanding keeps growing, but it's the same 12 steps.
That's the same thing. They told me every time I go through something different, I'm a newcomer and I do all the same stuff now that I did when I was new, and it still works. So thank you. Can you tell us what service you got into and how soon you got a sponsor and worked through the steps, and maybe a little bit about that and what you still do as far as I know you're very active in service?
I got a sponsor. I was sitting next to a lady. I was probably 30 days sober, 20 days sober, 10 days sober. And I said, if you had more sobriety, I'd ask you to sponsor me. And she said, oh, I have plenty of sobriety to sponsor you. She had 4 months. And I know there's a lot of people with 4 months that would be totally qualified to sponsor, but I don't think I got what I needed right at first. So I was in this sticky situation trying to figure out, and I don't know how it fit together or worked out, but then I was led to another sponsor who had more experience with the steps and took me through them.
Okay.
And today I continue working the steps. I still have a sponsor that I can be totally and completely honest with. Just recently, I had to tell on myself, and it's never fun, but there's such a freedom afterwards. I just don't mind. I got to make an amends Monday to my daughter and her husband because I said something totally inappropriate, but I get to make it up. So I'm human and I keep working these steps and I keep doing the deal because that way I can live comfortably in my own skin.
Yeah. Okay, what were meetings like when you got sober? Because they're different now than when we got sober. But what was it like for you?
I, it was good, solid AA. A lot of the meetings I go to today are just good, solid AA meetings. But through the years, I have gone to some meetings that felt more like group therapy. And I found other meetings that were more, but I don't know that there was a whole lot of difference. That's why AA is still around.
Yeah. When I had meetings, they would ask, like sometimes they would say, do you have a topic to discuss? And somebody would do that, or they'd go through the back of when the daily reflections came out and somebody would pick a topic and we would read pages and alternate through that. So there's a little bit I've seen that's different for the ones I went to. Let's see if I have some other questions. How has having your story in the book changed? Do people react differently to you now than they did before that came out?
One of the most, I've had a variety of responses, but one of the most interesting is I was speaking at a conference in California. This was probably 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And this guy did not know my story was in the big book. And they were talking about the stories in the big book. And he said, I think anybody that has their story in the big book should be dead. And so I just kept my mouth closed because I knew he'd find out before the conference was over. He and I have become such good friends. For all these years on my birthday, he always calls and responds. I think he learned a little lesson, and so did I that day. I love it when people ask me to sponsor them and they don't know my stories in the big book because I know they're coming to me because they like the way I work my program. And that means a lot to me. And then they find out later, and I get that experience a lot. The ones that just want me to sponsor them because they think I know something because my story is in the book, they're not asking me to sponsor them for the right reasons. And those ones concern me. But I think some people, right at first, some treat me like I'm a rock star, her story's in the big book. But if you're around me very long at all, that just goes away and I'm another alcoholic. But the one part that I think is nice is and it's been said to me so often, we're just people. Those stories are just people working the program, just like just like all of us. So I think sometimes it helps people, sometimes there's just different responses. I don't know if I answered well, but there's just different responses.
Great. That's great. Thank you. A couple other questions. You said I believe you said you believed in God when you got here. How has it evolved to the one you have today? And was it through your spiritual experiences or life situations? And are there any special prayers that you've used or things when you were really new that helped you that you still use, or something maybe your sponsor shared with you?
When I was early, my self-esteem was so low and I didn't feel like I fit in, I didn't feel like I deserved much. I didn't know how to love myself. And one of the prayers I said back then was, God, let me accept the abundance that you have in store for me, because I didn't know how to let life be good. I didn't know how to do that. Then there was a time that I would pray, God, bring into my life everyone that's supposed to be here and remove from my life everyone that's not supposed to be here, because I couldn't figure that out, who I was supposed to spend time with and who I wasn't. And today it's much more just thy will be done. Show me how I can be loving and of service today. And just a lot of the third and seventh step prayer,
Thanks,
the
Gay.
serenity prayer.
But when you look back at your story, does anything stand out to you in your early recovery or even now that was that slender thread that happened? You might not be in AA. I know you shared about that lady when you were working, when she went to take the order that was in AA. That could have been one, but is there any other things you can think of that would have changed? Or
The things that really struck me was, and you've heard me share this before, Carol, that I was with two women, mamas, and our kids were home with the dads, and one of those ladies looked at the other lady and said, talking about me, and said, she's an alcoholic. I had no idea I drank differently than other people. So it was those little remarks that people offended me that helped me break through the denial. And a kid asking me why my hands were shaking in the morning. Those remarks helped me break through my denial.
thank you. When I came in, I had was one of those contempt prior to investigation things. When my sponsor would make a suggestion, sometimes I hesitated, and I had a trust issue. Did you have that too? And how did you work through that? If you
Like
did,
I said, are you trusting with other people in AA or trusting a higher power?
either one or both.
When I got to AA, a man came up to me at my second, third, fourth meeting and said, honey, I don't know why they always called me honey back then, but honey, you need these older guys. He said, you need to put your faith, you can put your faith in God, you can put your faith in AA, but don't put your faith in any of us. We're all human, and on any given day, we can let you down. But you can always put your faith in God, and you can always put your faith in AA. That stuck. I heard that 38 years ago, and it stuck. And so it's also helped me to let y'all be human. Y'all don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be perfect. We get to live and let live and grow. This isn't a graduation. This is tools that we get to use to get us back into that place of emotional sobriety and spiritual centeredness and connection to a higher power.
Thank you, Gay. Because yeah, it says God, that no human power could have relieved us. And my first sponsor taught me don't rely on the humans to keep me sober. It had to be a higher power, and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. There are no more questions in the chat for you. Thank you so much for doing this with us, and I appreciate your time and your honesty and your friendship.